Okay, so now I've pretty much completed the model of the headphones. Using all the techniques that we've gone over, cutting, connecting, extruding, I created these outer plastic rectangles, these four, using the same technique I used to create these. You can see them here in the image, here, 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 and here. Again, they kind of hug the shape of that first object that we created on the inside, and then they're rectangular, flat on the outside. So I use the same method that I used to create these inner plastic rectangles to create these. I used the cut tool to draw some edges to create an opening that matches the shape of the opening on the headphones. I modeled the microphone by using the box that we created in the primitive assignment, extruding, cutting, and moving sub-objects. I created a very low resolution cylinder that I attached to the end of it so that I can rotate it up and down in the same manner that the actual microphone rotates. I created this inner band on both sides that extends out from the middle of the outer band on both sides. That inner band is what connects to the cups on each side. And then I've attached everything together. And I made the decision to leave certain elements unattached because I want to be able to animate those. So I want to be able to animate each cup by the group. So I can rotate the cup as a group on both sides. And then I can move the band as a whole. I modeled this volume hub using the primitives that I created in the first assignment, extruded out these areas where the cord attaches, used the cut tool and extrusions to create these openings for it. There's a wheel that controls the volume. I left that unattached because I might want to animate that in a later assignment. Same with this mute switch. I might want to be able to move it back and forth as it does on the actual microphone during the animation, so I left that unattached. There's a splitter here that the main cord goes into and then splits out for the headphone jack and for the USB connection. Again, both of these are modeled using the same techniques that we covered in the tutorial. The last thing I want to show you is how to extrude along a spline here to create the cord. So the first thing I'll do is unhide the cylinder that I originally created for the cord housing that attaches to the cup here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to taper this cylinder because you can see that it's a little bit wider on the top than the bottom. Now the way that the taper modifier works is it tapers based on the pivot point. So I want it to taper at the bottom, not at the top. So I'm going to set the pivot point at the top because it's always going to taper on the opposite side of the pivot point. So I'll snap the pivot point up to the top here. So I'll snap the pivot point up to the top here and then add a taper modifier. And the amount is going to be the amount of taper. So it looks pretty close. If I wanted to add some curvature to it, I would need to add more resolution to the taper because just like the bend, these modifiers can only deform the object based on the subcomponents that make it up. But this is a low poly model, so I'm not going to worry about creating that kind of detail. I will imply these openings in this area with texturing instead. So once I'm happy with the tapering here, I'll collapse all of this and then convert this to an editable poly. Then I'll rotate it to match the configuration of I'll rotate it to match the reference image. And then move it up so that it intersects with the then move it up so that it intersects with the bottom of the cup. Okay, so now I'm going to use booleans again to create a hole for this. So just like with the capsule, the first thing I want to do is add the pro boolean to this cup. So create compound pro boolean. This time I'm going to set the operation to subtraction and subtract. So now I'll add the pro boolean to the cup, compound pro boolean. And again, I'll choose imprint and then choose the copy of that cylinder. Convert this to an editable poly again. Get rid of these polygons. And then I'm just going to quickly resolve these n-gons that I can see I have here. Okay. Show the original cylinder. That looks good. I'll save this. So in order to extrude these polygons from this cylinder to follow this line that you see here, the first thing I had to do was create the line. I do that simply by going to Create, Shapes, Line, and by default the initial type for the line is set to corner. And that means as I click to create these vertices, the segments between them will be straight. And I don't want that. I want a smooth line. So I want to set the initial type to smooth. And then I simply click to create vertices, and the line will be smooth between them. I create as many as I want, and then I can go to the line, select the vertices, and move them around to shape the chord exactly as I wanted it. And that's essentially what I did with this one here. So I want to rotate this cup group down because the cups themselves on the headphones are facing somewhat inward. So I want to rotate this down. But the first thing I want to do is I want to connect this cylinder to the left cup group. And I'm going to go into my schematic view to do that. So, Graph Editor, New Schematic View. And this is essentially a visual representation of all the nodes that you have in your scene. So, I have this cylinder here. And what I want to do is I want to link it to this left cup group, which is over here. So the first thing I want to do is drag this cylinder, left drag it over near where I want to link it. And then I'm going to press this button here that says connect, and then I'll just drag the cylinder to the left cup group. You can see that cylinder is grouped under the left cup group. So now I'm going to rotate the group itself so that it lines up with this chord. And then I'm going to move this vertex here so that it's snapped to the bottom center of this cylinder. So now what I'm going to do is extrude this inner ring of polygons along this spline here. So I'll select the cylinder, select the middle vertex here, hold down Control and convert to polygons. And you'll see slightly below the extrude button, I have a button that says extrude along spline. So I'm going to open up the settings for that. And the button here says pick spline. So I want to make sure that I pick the spline that I'm working with here. And then you can see that these polygons have been extruded along the spline that I created. But it's a bit faceted because right now there aren't enough segments to follow the shape of that line that I created. So I'm going to drag this up, and you'll see that each time it starts to match the shape a little bit more closely. So right about that looks good. So hit the check mark. And that's how I create the geometry for the chord. So I would do the same exact thing for the other two sections here. So I would select this ring of polygons and extrude it along this spline. And then I would select this ring of polygons and extrude it along this spline in the same manner. I don't need this geometry where it intersects with the volume hub. So I'm going to add an edge loop here and move it so that it lines up with the end of the volume hub on this side. Do the same thing. Add a edge loop, move it so that it lines up with this. And then I can get rid of the polygons that are inside of the volume hub here. And that's about it for the modeling portion of the project. Now I've modeled all the shapes that I want. I've attached the pads to the cups on both sides. I attached the inner plastic rectangles and the outer plastic rectangles to the cup. I left the microphone unattached so that I can rotate it independently during animation. I left the volume wheel and this mute button separate in case I want to animate those. But it basically attached anything together that I either want to be able to select as a whole or animate as a whole. And you can see that there's a hierarchy here. The headphones group is the top node here, and that would move everything associated with the headphones as a whole. I have a band group that I can move. I have a left cup group that I can move and rotate, a right cup group that I can move and rotate, and then a group for each of the peripherals, the USB, the volume hub, the jack, and the splitter. And then I would just finish this by extruding those polygons along these splines here for the cords that connect to the jack and the USB.